And we're live. My name's Mark,
My name is Mark.
and this is the M&M Show, where we'll be discussing fantasy football for Week 13 and getting ready for Week 14. Are you in the playoffs, Mark, already? Have you clinched your positions?
Yeah. In 2 of the 3 leagues I've locked in. I think one of them I'll probably be the 1 seed when it's all said and done. In our dynasty league, things have gone sideways really quickly, so not looking good on that front. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'm good to go in 3 out of my 4 leagues, which I'll say it's a nice accomplishment. I'm still on the verge in one of my leagues, but it's just not looking likely. I need a lot of things to go right my way, and I just don't see the math working its way out. So, praying for
Is
the
that
best.
is that one of those leagues where you went receiver heavy instead of running back heavy?
It's funny you say that. It's an 8-man league, and my first 3 picks were running backs. And everything else just wasn't working. I mean, we're talking Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, and Devon Achane with my first 3 picks.
Oof.
Um,
The
yeah,
Brees Hall especially, that one's gotta hurt.
absolutely. So, aside from that, we made some predictions the last time we recorded before Thanksgiving. So, took a little bit of a break, but now we're back. Do you remember what predictions you had?
Yeah, I wish I could forget them. These were from 2 weeks ago, but none of them hit. None of them were good. I am bad at this prediction business. I had Xavier Worthy getting 2 touchdowns on fewer than 5 catches. He had fewer than 5 catches. He had 4 for like 50 yards, no touchdowns against the Panthers, and yeah, that wasn't good. I had Brian Robinson Jr. going for over 130 yards rushing and a touchdown. He got close to that last week, but 2 weeks ago he threw up a stinker. He had 5 rushing attempts for like 13 yards. So well off base there. And then my fun little prediction was CMC throwing a pass when the 49ers played the Packers. He didn't throw a pass, and he also played horribly. I think he had his worst fantasy output of the season. He scored more points last week when he had a season-ending injury than he did the week prior. So yeah, I should probably stop with predictions. But how about you? Any success?
I think part of the issue is that we're just a little too bold, and that's all it is. Um, I didn't have no, of course not. I always try to give myself a little credit for being somewhat close. So AJ Brown, somewhat in the ballpark. I think I guessed under on the yardage that he actually turned out to have, and I guess he would have 2 touchdowns. He had 1. Still a monster game back in Week 12, but and then Marvin Harrison Jr. was just missing a touchdown and a handful of more receptions, but the yardage was pretty much on point aside from that. So good to see MHJ do something, but now he had a stinker last week, so already the first loser of the day.
He's been all over the place. When he got drafted, I thought he was going to be, probably the best performing rookie this season, and instead we've seen a lot of other guys step up. We've seen Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams has been up and down. Bo Nix has had some good games. We've seen Bucky Irving just dominating. But yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr., I wish he and Malik Neighbors, they just feed them the ball a lot more. I think fantasy owners would be happy about that.
Yeah, and to think you had to use a 2nd-round pick to have Marvin Harrison Jr. on your squad is just absurd at this point.
Yeah, he was going high.
Yeah. All right. Let's discuss our winning quarterback, son. So who'd you have as your Week 13 winning quarterback?
I had Josh Allen. A part of it is a novelty, right? I think he was like QB2 or QB3 for Week 13. But fun fact, first quarterback ever to have a passing touchdown, receiving touchdown, and rushing touchdown in the same game. That came courtesy of a really weird play and lateral with Amari Cooper, snow game against the 49ers. But I mean, for that alone, you got to give him credit. And he's really been performing over the past few weeks. To start the season, I had questions about Josh Allen, but he's kind of put those concerns to bed. He's been like a top 3 quarterback throughout the season. And yeah, if you have him on your team, you're feeling good about him. He's not going to give you all 3 of those touchdowns every game, but he'll probably give you some rushing value, and he's been passing the ball really well the past few weeks.
Yeah, I definitely have my concerns about Josh Allen going into the season too. It just seemed like the schedule was going to be relatively tough, but he's just showing he's him. So, and yeah, nothing like seeing one of those passing lateral TDs in the snow, to say less. So, just putting on a show. I think you and I were pretty big Jayden Daniels fans. So I'm just going to have Jayden Daniels as my winning QB. It's funny building out the list. Like, I'm already able to tell, like, we're almost my winners weekend or, every other week or so. So it's like, in a way, summing up MVP points per positions. So Daniels has been one of those guys, and he had a great 2-week stretch between the time we last recorded. So now he gets treated with the bye week, and we can finally rest a little on Daniels.
I had a couple questions about him prior to our last episode because he had some slower games, some tough matchups. But yeah, the past 2 weeks he's been really good. I think it's good to see him too. Like last week, feeding Terry like 2 touchdowns, I think it was in the first half. That's something I want to see, as opposed to him almost like padding his stats with Hail Marys or deep passes in the fourth quarter. But we've talked about it all year. He's a phenomenal quarterback for a rookie, especially. Just definitely overperforming compared to expectations.
Yeah, who's your rookie of the year? Is it Bo Nix or Jayden Daniels?
Jayden Daniels, easy. Jayden Daniels. I mean, I think part of it is like I didn't have expectations for the Broncos whatsoever, and so Bo Nix has been a pleasant surprise. Commanders, I just expected to be bad, and instead, they're a threat in the NFC East, even with the Eagles dominating. So we'll see if they make it into the playoffs, if they make a run. I doubt it, but yeah, Jayden Daniels is him.
Yeah, see, I can't help but let my bias get in the way of me. But I'll say this: Daniels had the better start. Bo Nix has been better, maybe in the middle. They've kind of in the middle during the middle of the season or so, and now this last stretch, Daniels has turned it up, and so has Bo Nix. But it's gonna be fun to see like who ends up getting it. But I think Daniels has more of a narrative on his end.
See, if we're only talking fantasy, I feel like it's a toss-up because Bo Nix has almost more upside for rushing. But if you're a GM and you have Jayden Daniels or Bo Nix, who are you taking?
Absolutely. Yeah, Jayden Daniels, without a question. All right. So we would have one losing QB there, but let's talk about fantasy losing QBs this past week. Who do you have there on your list?
I've got Kirk Cousins. I know it's a little bit of a freebie because he just had that bad of a game. He had like 2 fantasy points, 4 interceptions. I think at one point he had 3 interceptions on consecutive drives. Like, he cost them that game by himself. Kirk Cousins is definitely not like, a top 5 quarterback, but probably top 15, especially with all the weapons the Falcons have in Drake London and Darnell Mooney and Bijan and Kyle Pitts. So for Kirk Cousins to come out and play like this is awful. And he hasn't been good the past few weeks. So we'll see if he can turn it around against this old team this coming week. But yeah, for week 13, definitely the worst quarterback that we saw in fantasy.
Yeah. If it's not Kirk, then you know who's knocking on the door there.
Do tell.
Yeah, it's good old Michael Penix, one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch last year in college. So, yeah, I mean, I hope Kirk can turn it around. I like him. You know, the his famous quote is just super iconic. So, um, let's see what he can do. I have CJ Stroud as my loser. He's been a loser for me multiple times. Over the course of the fantasy season, and yeah, he just might not be my ultimate like fantasy QB loser. So, especially where you were taking him in the draft, it was probably around the fourth round, fifth round type of range. So that's still an expensive price to pay for a quarterback when you could still gotten Daniels in the seventh.
I think we made the mistake or a lot of people did, of putting him in the same bracket as like Joe Burrow. And I mean, part of it is, Nico Collins goes down early on in the season. That impacts who CJ Stroud has to throw the ball to. But yeah, I didn't expect this amount of regression from his rookie year.
Yeah, the Texans are still a good team, so he's still going to be able to turn some things around or have at least a few more chances this year. Believe. All right. Okay, so the Texans, they'll be on a bye week this week, so we won't put CJ as a loser next week. That's the good thing. All right. So yeah, let's do wildcard QBs.
Do you want to kick us off? You've got some young guys on here too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have out of nowhere QBs. I have Will Levis and Bryce Young, mostly because they've put up some respectable fantasy numbers the last couple weeks. So, we're talking about bye weeks with CJ Stroud, the bye weeks with Jaden Daniels. So, if you need a guy, and also if you need a quarterback looking into the playoffs too, I believe the Panthers and definitely the Titans have some favorable schedules in terms of the defenses they're playing. So I think Levis and Young are going to be capable of just giving you at least a consistent 15 points, and you hope for better. And so, yeah, that's who I like. Who do you have?
I've got Jameis Winston on here, but we don't have to spend too much time on him. I think he definitely came out of nowhere, treated us to the full Jameis experience, like threw for 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I think 2 of those were pick sixes. Just a nasty game, but for fantasy, it's bonkers numbers. The other wild card quarterback I've got on here is Russell Wilson. He was a top 4 quarterback last week against Cincinnati, which isn't exactly the best passing defense out there, but I didn't expect him to throw a season high 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had an interception in there. He doesn't, have the same rushing upside as Justin Fields did at the start of the season, but Russell Wilson is kind of coming into his element with the Steelers right now. So, yeah, I don't know if he's going to be, top 6 quarterback week over week, but I would take him over a guy like Will Levis or Bryce Young if they're available.
Yeah, another thing to allude there as far as Russell Wilson playing Cincinnati. Yeah, he's coming into his own with the Steelers, like you said, but these Cincinnati games just seem to be pretty high scoring affairs. So who does Cincinnati have this week? It's going to be the Dallas Cowboys. So maybe we want to trust Cooper Rush this weekend. No. Maybe there's something there.
That's a pipe dream. That's a pipe dream if I've ever heard one.
If you clinch your playoff positions and you're clearly in the 1 seed, just throw in Cooper Rush for some fun. Come on now. Awesome. All right. Let's go to your territory here with running back guru. Hit us with your winner or winners.
I've got 2 Robinsons on here. I've got Bijan. We talked about Kirk Cousins being an awful quarterback last week. Bijan made up for that. He had a career high rushing attempts, which is something you like to see when he's been losing some touches to Tyler Algier all of this season and last. Not the most efficient outing. I think he averaged like around 4 yards a carry, but he still had 100 yards rushing, a touchdown. He caught every single pass Kirk Cousins threw his way. So big game for Bijan. You hope that he continues to perform like that to return that first round value. The other running back I've got as a winner is Brian Robinson Jr. with the Commanders. Austin Eckler's on IR, probably out for the rest of fantasy. And Brian Robinson had a really good game. He split a lot of touches with the Commanders' fourth string or third string running back, but he still had like 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. It was pretty efficient. It was on like 15 or 16 carries. So yeah, both of those guys did well with the opportunities they had.
Yeah, very nice. Love to see the two Robinsons, and even sweeter if you have them both on the same team for your fantasy teams. As far as my winners go, I went really trivial here. These are two guys that I have in one of my teams, and they're just really a nice foundation. So yeah, James Cook and Devon Achane. James Cook with 100 yards rushing, 1 touchdown, doing it in the snow also. So I'm glad, over the course of the season, this guy's really paid off, especially where you took him in the 5th round. You and I were high on him coming into the year, so we made some pretty good quote-unquote gambles with Cook. And then, similar story with Achane. However, he almost did no work on the ground, just terribly inefficient, but he got like 8 receptions and a touchdown to go with it. So for PPR play, he was awesome.
Yeah, I think Achane had like 20 yards rushing, so I'd hesitate to call him a winner last week, but he still put up numbers, like you said, whether it's half PPR or PPR. If you're catching that number of passes and you're getting receiving yards, you're still contributing. So
and that's why you might be the guru, but I'm just an Achane believer. He just breaks the game, and especially for PPR players. So I know you like your half PPR. So,
what running back losers do you have for this past week?
Yeah, I have obviously Christian McCaffrey for starters, just getting hurt this past week. He was able to help some owners, whether they traded for him or whether they held out until he was finally healthy. Just the worst loss of any player in fantasy whatsoever, with being the number 1 overall. So, and then for more relevant sort of players that will still stick around for the end of the season, DeAndre Swift. I know he's questionable right now, but he had a rough 2-week outing. He wasn't quite giving you the output that you wanted, that he was doing earlier in the year, when we were doubting him. He shut us up for a bit, but, now it's starting to be a little too much for him, and starting to revert back to the mean a little bit, especially with the Chicago Bears and how that organization's going.
Yeah, I was going to say the whole Bears offense as a whole has been struggling, but part of me, the sicko in me, is a little happy that DeAndre Swift is starting to regress. I'm big on doubting him. CMC owners, I feel bad for them, right? Because you draft him probably with your 1st or 2nd pick. He's out for 9 weeks, 10 weeks, comes back. You're like, all right, maybe he can add some value, and then he goes down again. And then obviously just from the human element, you got to feel for this guy because he's a premier athlete, fantastic person. I think he's like a Walter Payton, character, NFL player candidate every year. And, he's been going through it with these injuries.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Is it a running back type of, is it the cliff? Has the cliff hit for McCaffrey, or do we have to wait a year? But it's probably more unlucky, and given the fact that he hasn't played all year, and then he has to, they took their time with him, and it just unfortunately didn't work out. So
Jordan Mason too on IR. Anybody paying attention to the CMC news? If you were thinking of picking up Jordan Mason, he's on IR as well. So you're now looking at your third string Isaac Correndo. Someone to target.
Absolutely, could be a great addition to close out the season. All right, who do you have as your wild or losers for running backs?
I'll hit these guys really quickly. Gus Edwards with the Chargers. J.K. Dobbins is on IR, so this was like a primo opportunity for him to have a big game, and he did not. The Chargers offense as a whole struggled, but Gus Edwards ran 6 times for 32 yards. That's just not the kind of volume or like point total that you'd want from someone who's got lead back opportunities. And Kenneth Walker III, similar situation. He had 16 attempts, which is a lot more than Gus Edwards did, but he only turned that into 50 yards. That's like 3 yards a carry. He had 2 catches for negative yardage. You talked about Achane having, limited rushing return, but then catching a lot of passes. And Kenneth Walker has done that in previous weeks. He didn't do that last week. Totally inefficient game for him. He's not, probably your lead back, but that kind of output hurts you if you're a fantasy owner.
Yeah, no question. I've definitely been turned on more with, been more in favor of Kenneth Walker as the season's gone. I wasn't a believer in this at the start, but I like him now. He's just been a reliable running back. I just wonder what that price is going to look like next year in the draft. So I'm confident he'll bounce back. Let's tackle our wildcard running backs. So start us off with yours. I do not recognize this name.
I didn't either. I had to do a double take. It's Chris Rodriguez Jr. I think on the depth chart for the Washington Commanders, he's RB4. Eckler is out on IR, and then Jeremy McNichols is the nominal running back number 3. But Chris Rodriguez Jr. jumped Jeremy McNichols last week. Had comparable numbers to Brian Robinson Jr., who we see as a winner for last week. Chris Rodriguez had like 90 yards rushing and a touchdown. Will he get that next week? Very unlikely. Hence the wild card. But he really made the most of his opportunities this past week.
Yeah, definitely noticed him. I think he's a rookie. So you and I, since we're in the same dynasty league, we might have to give it a shot unless someone already has him. Yeah, for my wild card, I have Rico Dowdle. There wasn't really a running back that popped out at me this past week, but Dowdle and the Cowboys played the Giants, and Dowdle was just able to have probably one of his best games of the year. So I'm going to give him his flowers, and we'll see if he can replicate it again.
Yeah, this past week was definitely much more favorable for wide receivers in fantasy than running backs. So if you actually want to kick us off with your receiver winners.
Yeah, sure thing. So I mentioned this guy last time as a wild card, and what better time than now to turn him into a winner. So we got Nick Westbrook, Ikhine. So Tennessee Titans receiver. I'm not sure what the situation is with Calvin, really. I didn't check that just because I kind of overlook a team like the Tennessee Titans at times. But this guy certainly caught my eye because, as I mentioned, he had a very high snap count. And even though he might be getting 4 targets for three or 2 receptions a game, he was getting at least a touchdown. And he has, I think he has like 8 or 9 touchdowns now. So very, very unexpected. but he has great momentum, and he's in every offensive play. You have Will Levis throwing the ball to him, and they're going to visit Jacksonville this weekend. So it could be, depending if the weather doesn't interfere too much, it might be cloudy, it might be rainy, but it's a good matchup to maybe take a bet on.
Yeah, I think to start the season or throughout the season, he's been characterized as like a boomer bust player. And he's definitely been a lot more consistent the past few weeks. I think he's like been putting up 15 points, 12, 15 points on a regular basis, which is great for a flex play, for even for a receiver too. Yeah, you're definitely not getting snow in Jacksonville either. I don't know what the weather is going to be like, but it's not going to be like that San Francisco Buffalo game last week.
I think whether it's snow or rain, well, if it's snow, I think it just favors passing altogether as far as what I've seen. Who do you have as your receiving winners?
Yeah, if we're talking about Florida, I've got two Florida guys here. I've got Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Bucks. He's back. He was injured for a little bit, and he's back in his element. He had a really good touchdown grab, like a spinning one-handed touchdown last week. But aesthetics aside, he went for 8 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. In all formats, that's a really good week for a receiver. And with Chris Godwin out for the season, Mike Evans shouldn't have too much competition for targets. So he's looking really good to close out the year. The other receiver I've got on here is Tyreek Hill, Miami Dolphins. Not crazy numbers. He had 6 catches, 80 yards, a touchdown, but that was the highest fantasy point total he had since week 1. The Dolphins have kind of been all over the place, struggling for much of the year. Tyreek Hill as well. So good game for him. Good to get some value out of him. Definitely not what you invested in the first or second round. But yeah, good week for him.
Yeah, I agree. It feels odd when the cheetah just isn't hitting like it used to. So, yeah, let's go into our losers then. I have DK Metcalf, mainly just because he's just had a couple slow weeks. Nothing that wouldn't dissuade me from wanting him on my team, but you expect a little more. You expect well, let's see. I think he was saved by a touchdown from one of his games, whether it was week 12 or week 13, can't really remember. But Metcalf is one of those guys that I thought at this point, looking back like years ago, he'd just be like this super stud wide receiver, should be a top 5 guy in the game. And this season just shows yet again that he, probably not all that. Even though the talent's there, the physicality is there. Who knows? Maybe it's the quarterback. Who knows?
I mean, he screams potential. It's like every time you watch him on the field or you're playing against him in fantasy, you're worried or you're engaged. But I'm just looking at it right now. He hasn't caught a touchdown since week 7. He has 3 total for the year. He hasn't topped 100 yards receiving since week 4. He had 99 in week 7. But for someone who is a wide receiver 1, he hasn't been performing up to those expectations.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely rough. And who knows? Jackson Smith has been performing pretty well, so it's maybe like a change of the guard here, but it seems a little too soon than what it should have been. Who do you have as a loser?
Similar situation, maybe. I've got CeeDee Lamb. Again, top tier receiver, but you have Dak going down. You have the Cowboys struggling on offense, and he's questionable. He got a little banged up. I don't know if he's playing this week or not, but last week he was not good. He had 2 catches for 40 yards. You don't really want to see that from anyone except maybe a tight end these days, and certainly not from CeeDee Lamb. So I know he's got Cooper Rush throwing him the ball. I know he's got a lot of defensive attention, but he still goes in the loser category for this past week.
Yeah, it's concerning. We've called out several first rounders in this video where aside from Tyreek Hill being a winner, it's been a rough season. So it kind of just makes me think that we're not going to see the favorable wide receiving first round picks going into next season. We're going to see a lot of favorable running back picks. And the only two receivers I can think about that could go in the first round, I mean, that probably should go in the first round, are Chase and Justin Jefferson.
Yep. Both young. Justin Jefferson, I'm curious to see how the Vikings quarterback room looks like next year. But yeah, definitely agree with you. I think part of it is just injuries, right? You can never predict those. But I'm a big running back proponent, and we can dive into the nitty-gritty on that some other time.
Yeah.
But let's round out our wide receivers.
We have one more section. We both had Jeudy as a wild card. Obviously, monster performance against my dear Denver Broncos. In some cold weather too. Jeudy just giving us a little bit of a sting, a little bit of a revenge game against his former team that, definitely didn't work out with Jeudy, but now he's showing, the prospect talent that he was in Alabama and why he was regarded so highly then. So shame he had to save his best game against us, but, I'll give him a pass. All right. I'll give him a pass. That's okay.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add to that. Jameis Winston threw for just under 500 yards. Somebody had to catch that. Turns out that someone was Jerry Jeudy. So monster game for him. He probably won a lot of folks their week 13. The other wild card for receiver that I had at least was Parker Washington. I had to look to see what team he was on. I didn't know. It's Jacksonville Jaguars. But he had a big game. He caught 6 passes for 100 yards and a touchdown. Anytime you have guys like that break out onto the scene, even if it's just for a week, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. Definitely worth taking a look at the waiver wire, seeing if there's any changes to the depth chart, injuries. With Jacksonville right now, we don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to start next week or Mac Jones. Either way, I wouldn't bank on Parker Washington, replicating this performance, but definitely a surprise for a lot of us.
Yeah, Jacksonville, as I mentioned earlier, Tennessee and Jacksonville, they're playing each other, and excuse me, they're at Tennessee, not Jacksonville. But still, weather might be cloudy regardless. And then, they will face Tennessee again later on week 17. So if we get that far, we can have that conversation. But, good looks to, call out some of these guys that are just starting to break out in the later end of the year. It could be fruitful to just at least consider, if you need a guy in the flex, or if you need a receiver, or if you're lucky to get Guerendo from the waiver wires, these are guys that could help win your leagues and help you win in the playoffs. So let's go to our tight end winners then. Hit us with it.
Yeah, again, this is a freebie. Kind of like Kirk Cousins was a loser. It's Brock Bowers. I feel like we keep saying Brock Bowers almost week to week, and he keeps getting better. Last week, he caught the most receiving yards he's had all season with 140 and a touchdown. The target share is insane. I think he had like another 14 or 15 targets last week. He's one of the only bright spots on a really bad Raiders team, and it's his rookie season. I don't know what the ceiling is for Brock Bowers. He's showing out. He's a different player than Kyle Pitts is, but he is very much what I thought Kyle Pitts would be like 2 years ago. So yeah, he's my tight end winner for this past week, and he probably will be again between now and week 17.
Yeah, tight ends are going to be so interesting for next year. I really just want to do a lot of forward thinking now since it's really the tail end of the year. But without a doubt, Bowers is going to be a fourth or fifth rounder. Could maybe even creep up into the third round, even though that's a high price to pay for a tight end. I don't see another tight end aside from, San Francisco 49ers, Kittle, maybe being even close to Brock Bowers. So, Sam
Well,
Laporta, what are we going to do with him next year?
we'll see. I was gonna say I might take Laporta over Kittle, but both of those are definitely like 2A, 2B, and Brock Bowers is a clear number one tight end. I feel like the third round might be pushing it, but if we expect a lack of value at the tight end position again next year, like we saw to start off this year, Brock Bowers is going high.
Yep, agreed. Third round, you heard it here first. All right. I'll jump into the loser here. My loser here real quick. I had Bowers as a winner also, like you mentioned, but my loser is Travis Kelce, mainly because I gave Noah Gray a shout out last time we recorded. And, of course, you responded with who would even start him. And ever since then, or he had like another monster game in week 12 to follow that up. So it's like, seems like Noah Gray is a legitimate, touchdown threat for the Chiefs. Since everyone, Kelsey's taken away all that attention. So, Noah Gray is eating from Travis Kelce's plate. And so that's why Travis Kelce is my loser.
Taylor Swift is about to call up some hitmen. Noah Gray is about to get the Tanya treatment, lose a knee. My tight end loser for this past week is Cade Otton with the Bucks. I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago we were talking about him as a winner, and that was before Mike Evans came back. There was a lack of competition for targets, and all of a sudden, Cade Otton is no longer the primary target for Baker Mayfield. He had 20 yards on 4 catches. Those 20 yards were the fewest he had since week 6. So when you have a low like that, it's not good. It's not promising. The sample size from the past 3 weeks isn't great either. Probably still startable because of the lack of depth at the tight end position, but you definitely don't feel as good about him now as you did in week 9.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great call out because he was tearing it up when Evans wasn't there, like you said. Cade Otton, I forgot all about him, but that's why when we put 2 brains together, it's better than one. So, still a worthy option. I would agree with you. You have to just take a chance if that's the best tight end you have, and just kind of roll with that punch if because it could hit at any moment also. But yeah, let's go to our wild cards. So who do you have as yours?
Yeah, I've got David Njoku with Cleveland. Obviously, the highlight of last week was Jameis Winston and Jerry Jeudy. But Njoku had 17 targets, which is a crazy amount of volume. He didn't convert that into a ton of yards. He had like 50, but 2 of those catches were for touchdowns. And he consistently is a top tier target for Jameis Winston in the red zone, at a position again that oftentimes struggles producing value. Those touchdowns are huge, and the fact that David Njoku has those opportunities says a lot. So he had a better game than I expected last week, and I'm hoping he can kind of build on that going forward.
Yeah, Njoku been pretty stellar. From the time he's played to now. And with Jameis there at the helm, anything is possible. I have Jonnu Smith as my wild card. He's been doing this. He's been on a 3-week tear. So let's see here. We have 11 targets, an average of over 9 targets the last 3 weeks, over 7.5 receptions, and over 80 yards in each of his games the last 3 weeks, and 3 touchdowns total. So it's been a revelation because Jonnu Smith has been around for a while. I think he played for the Titans at one point. I think he's maybe at the Patriots for a little bit. I'm not entirely sure, but really just playing or just having some of the best numbers he's ever had in his career. So I'm interested to see if he's able to keep it up. It seems too good to be true that he can keep this up to till the end of the season. But if he does, I wouldn't mind, since he might just help me win a championship.
I mean, the number of targets has definitely increased in recent weeks, but it's otherwise been fairly consistent. He's just converting a lot more with those opportunities. You mentioned the past 3 weeks up until week 11. So all the weeks prior, he had exactly one game where he scored more than 10 fantasy points. And all of a sudden in the past 3, it's like 15 plus every single week. So hopefully it's, positive momentum. He'll keep it going. But we'll see. I don't see any reason why he can't do more with those 7, 8, 9 targets per game.
Yeah, I'll give you one reason. The matchups might be a little tough. So you have the New York Jets. Who knows what to make of them? It just seems like a bad situation there. Houston, who could be tough. San Francisco, Cleveland, and if the season goes week 8, I guess week 18 is a little irrelevant, but could be a tough stretch for the Dolphins in general.
We'll see.
Yeah. Sweet. So if any trade deadlines have not taken place, what's something you want on your team, or who's going to be your playoff MVP?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just assuming that for most leagues, most folks, trade targets are in the rearview mirror. So we're looking at waiver wire pickups for folks that you have on your bench that you need to plug in. Bucky Irving is one of them, not just because he was the number 1 running back last week, but because he's been getting better as the season's progressed, and he is good. I don't know about RB1 good, but definitely like RB2 on most folks' team. We also talked about injuries to CMC and then also Jordan Mason. If you haven't already picked up Isaac Guerendo, you need to. And I'm trying to think outside of those running backs who could really be clutch come playoffs. Who do you have?
Yeah, if a trade deadline is still available in any league for whatever reason, I would really just love to target anyone in the Cincinnati Bengals offense, and that won't be cheap, but it's just they're just great pieces of investments. And Cincinnati, they're just in these high scoring games. They're trying to win games. They're trying to salvage what they can from this season. So, and their defense is just not that good. So it just gives all the more reason to let the ball fly, especially with Joe Burrow. Chase Brown has been an amazing addition for those who have him. Joe Burrow, Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, or maybe even T. Higgins. He might be the best bang for your buck there on the Bengals offense.
I was going to say T. Higgins is probably the only one of those 4 that fantasy owners would be willing to part with. But yeah, that's a good call out.
Yeah. Perfect. So this brings us to the last section here. So our predictions for week 14 to close out some fantasy seasons. So let's well, let's have you kick us off here with the predictions.
I never feel good about these. I take that back. I feel good about these now, and then when we come back to them a week later, I'm like, God, why did I propose that? I've got Justin Herbert leading the Chargers in rushing yards in Week 14. Again, I'm not a believer in Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins is out. Justin Herbert can move, can hustle for some first downs. The other prediction I've got is Tyrone Tracy Jr. being a top 4 running back this week. The Giants are playing the Saints. Who's their quarterback? Tommy DeVito?
It might be Drew Lock. Yeah.
I don't know who's going to be under center. They'll probably try to pass the ball to Malik Neighbors, maybe, but I imagine that they'll be running the ball. And if Devin Singletary doesn't vulture touches or touchdowns, Tyrone Tracy Jr. could have a really big game. I like him. I probably like him as much as Alvin Kamara in terms of matchups, and I think he's got the potential to be a top 4 running back this week.
Yeah. I liked Tracy. I liked Tracy as a trade target a couple weeks ago. It seems like he hasn't quite hit that mark that I would have wanted to, based off his matchups the last couple weeks. I guess he was decent with Dallas, but yeah, I mean, let's see if he can do it. He could be winning some seasons still. I'm still in that camp. As far as your Justin Herbert prediction, I'm always fascinated with your predictions. Sometimes it's like sneaky in a way, but also clever. But I like it. I like it. I would have never thought of that. As for mine, I'm just gonna do my standard. I guess I have 2 quarterbacks here, so playing it a little safer with quarterbacks. So I got Bryce Young for 250 yards, 2 TDs, 50 yards rushing, and a rushing touchdown. So 3 total TDs. Bryce Young's having his week. I almost went for 300 yards, but come on, we'll cap it at 250. And another one of my safer picks will be Sam Darnold for 3 touchdowns against Atlanta. 3 throwing touchdowns.
I like that. I think Sam Darnold and Kirk Cousins are going to have really good games. I think I could see them both going for 3-4 touchdowns each. But yeah, that is a little bit bold because Sam Darnold's been having some bad games past couple weeks. So
yeah, well,
yeah,
we'll see. Fantasy standards, he's not half bad. It works.
The Bryce Young prediction is definitely spicy. So we'll see when we come back next week what that looks like.
No doubt. Carolina against Jacksonville. I love it. Alrighty. Well, good luck to everyone. Hope everyone can close out their seasons accordingly and make the playoffs. And if you didn't, there's always next year. So we'll be here to start preparing.
All right. We'll see y'all next week.